We have to stay home, but we still can celebrate our good moments. Don't miss the human touch with Sitecore hugs. The Sitecore Hackathon is one of the greatest events in our community. Every year, hundreds of people will lock themselves for 24 hours and join efforts to build some brand new features for Sitecore. To celebrate this legendary event, I had this pleasant conversation with the legend, the Hackathon Guy, Akshay Sura. Our friend will guide us through the history of the event, explain us how the whole process works, and bring stories of past editions. Okay, so Akshay, thank you for being here with us. So tell us how the Sitecore Hackathon started.
Back in the day, I think around 2013, I wanted to get more people involved, get people to talk to each other a little bit more and actually build a community. And other than like blog comments and a few things here and there wasn't really a pure community kind of environment. So I wanted to bring people together. And I came up with this idea of why not, let's do a hackathon. So towards the end of 2013, I started planning it. Tried to see if I can get a few people recruited with teams to sign up for the hackathon. There weren't many. There were like 11 teams in the first year. But it seemed like people really liked it. They ended up giving good feedback. They called me the Hackathon Guy. And I'm like, okay, this is good. So it seemed like a very viable event to run every year. And so we did. Every single year on year, we've added more and more people. I think this year we have 95 teams from 20 odd countries. So that's crazy when you think of it, how many people, on average, 2 people in a team, 100 teams. That's quite a bit of people staying up late writing code. So achieved.
I saw the first logotype. Do you want to speak about that?
Yeah, so, I'm not the graphic person type. I was just looking at something which represents a hackathon, which is people just hanging out, writing code for 24 hours. And I ended up finding this icon, which kind of represents, that's what I created when I first started the hackathon site. It still stays on the hackathon site. It hasn't been updated much, but it's 2 people sitting on a bench with a clock and they're writing away code. So that's how it first started. And then a few years ago, Peter got this graphic company involved and he helped us come up with the new hackathon logo, which is still not on the site, but we use it a lot for the social promotion as well as the plaques for the hackathon awards. And that went through a few of the iterations. Some people voted on it and we tried to figure out the best representation of what we think a hackathon award logo should be. And I think it looks pretty nice. We still use it. So
Do you want to tell any story about the first hackathon? How was the first time doing that?
The first one was interesting in the sense that I was still trying to figure out how to deal with the amount of work which goes into these hackathons is a lot. Once you get those submissions, it takes quite a bit of time to look through each of those submissions. So originally, I think I had a couple of people who I knew as judges. They had to look through each, install it locally with a clean instance and test it out, score it based on the scoring sheet, and then you'd get the results. But the whole process takes quite a bit of time. So things have changed since we first started to how we actually do it now. It's a little bit more processed, but that's the evolution from the first to now.
What about the Twitter hashtag SCHackathon?
The SCHackathon came about a few years ago when Sitecore Hackathon was too long of a hashtag and people would, have spelling mistakes and stuff. So we just shortened it. I think, if I'm right, it was again Peter who kind of suggested for us to shorten it to make it easier for people. And that's who came up with the SCHackathon. It kind of works and people have gotten used to it.
It's a Sitecore Hackathon, but what's actually the Sitecore involvement?
At first, when it began, I just started it myself. There was no Sitecore involvement. And I think after a couple of years, Peter, Mark Van Ast, and now Thomas, at that time, Peter had reached out saying, hey, do you need any help? As it gained more popularity and more people were signing up, things were happening. Peter used to support the hackathon, the infrastructure for the VMs, providing judges from the Sitecore and from the different departments, coordinating the results, as well as promoting it on Sitecore, helping out with the prize money. All of that was done with Sitecore in the middle. For the last couple of years, we've again pulled it out into a purely community-centric one where we run all of it. We have judges from the community who judge it, and we take care of everything without having to involve Sitecore at this moment.
You mentioned today that there's a lot to be done during the hackathon, before and after, right?
With the whole process, it's interesting because it starts with me starting to promote it around October, November, usually. Over the years, kind of figured out that the first week of March is the right time for the hackathon. So the sign-ups end towards the middle of February. So towards the end of February, the promotion as well as the sign-ups increase. Each time a sign-up comes in, we have to validate it. So I check their LinkedIn, Twitter handles to make sure people are legit and it's not like a fake form submission. Typically, it's usually the last year's judges. Maybe we'll add or remove one depending on people's availability. And then you start thinking about ideas in general, what you want to do. And again, that's a process which refines over time. And towards mid-February, you kind of know the main ideas you're trying to form. Once the sign-up ends, there are a couple of guys, Neil and Alex, who usually take care of it. We have a script which runs through and creates all of the repositories in GitHub. And then we have another script which takes the base repository and mirrors it on all of these repositories. So those are done. In the meantime, there's a lot of communication which goes to the teams to say, hey, these are the rules and regulations of what you need to submit, from that all the way to asking people to share their experiences, their pictures. The day before the hackathon starts, I load up the ideas and the email to go an hour before the hackathon. It's scheduled, so it's not like someone sitting and pressing the button, but the scheduled email goes out with the ideas, but half the people who should be checking their email, making sure they've gotten all the previous emails, never do. So the judges and myself, we are on like the Slack channel and social, trying to make sure that they're coordinated. Some people don't even check their repos until the last day, which is a shame, but it's the truth. And once you have that all coordinated, we try to share the responsibility in terms of the judges and myself of who will be monitoring the social channels as well as the Slack channel, because people have questions and doubts. And once the hackathon wraps up, towards the end, again, it gets crazy. So you're trying to help them close out and submit. Once it's submitted and everything is done, the repos are shut down automatically again with the script. Alex and Neil had written that. So they are all shut down. We still know the timestamps. Then we do a first round of review of all the repositories, whether they are filled in or not. If they have a submission in them, what's the timestamp? You have to make sure everyone has submitted it right. Then we get a list from that script of there's X amount of repositories which have code in them. Meet with the judges, divvy up like, okay, there's 50 valid submissions times X amount of judges, and I pick some. So we try to divide it between ourselves, mainly the judges. And then they start scoring them. And like I mentioned, it does take quite a while. Imagine a submission and you have to test it, isolate it from anything else you've tested before, right? So you need to test it. We have a checklist of the scoring card, which is also reflective of the submission criteria. Once that's done, typically takes about 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the number of submissions. We get together again, look through in each category, who are the top 4, who are top 5, and we usually talk about them. So the judge who scored it gets a chance to explain, and then you pick the top 3, so you reduce the pool again, look at them, figure out whose idea or the submission is like really good on every single matters, and you look at the score. You make sure that the judge is confident with the score they've given, and then you pick the winner from each of the thing. Once the winner is picked, we usually announce the winners at SCHackathon EU and give the plaques out there for people who are there. That's the end of the hackathon. So then you post everything online, the pictures for all the beers, pizza, Red Bull, everything's online anyways. So it's a fun process.
Recently, there has been changes last year in the hackathon. Can you explain the changes and why you adopt those changes?
We always encourage teams to set up right beforehand. So it's only natural that you set up your local machines. And in fact, we encourage that to set up your environments beforehand. You might have your base repository set up, your base solution, the basic things it needs to run. That is acceptable and it's a normal practice, and I wouldn't even think twice. But what we started noticing is in some of these submissions, you noticed heavy amounts of code being taken from people's own repositories, which were a couple of years old, exact copies of someone else's code, having a submission where it is basically impossible to produce in 24 hours. What I mean by that is when you see a hackathon submission, you can pretty much instantly tell if this was done in the last 24 hours or it was done beforehand. And because we were seeing inconsistencies of that sort, it's very easy to predict. This year it's going to be, I know there's going to be a JSS category, there's going to be an SXA category, maybe there'll be commerce, maybe there'll be content hub. To look at large buckets, it's actually interesting that if you let people know, build something in JSS, you might get 15 submissions which are completely different, really cool ideas might come to surface, great. But it also was bringing up people who were reusing a lot of someone else's repo, a lot of their own repos, or code was being copied and solutions were being copied. So what we tried to do is we tried to come up with ideas which throw people off. So people who were pre-set up with solutions already, ideas already, we were trying to see if we are able to throw them off. Can we stop cheating altogether? I don't think it's possible. It'll always be going to be that. But can we have them on their toes? I think we can. So the last couple of years of drastic change, it makes you almost want to think, oh crap, if I built this and they don't do it, my time is wasted. So those kind of drastic changes from time to time will get people not to instinctively do things.
Do you remember any attempts to cheat?
Oh yeah, so the one which was really interesting is, and the reason why this was very easy to catch is because this wasn't a public module at all. This was a piece of code I had written for a customer to do redirects. It was not a community module. It was not outside. The only people who would know it are the people who I worked for, or the customer would be the ones who would have that code. So we get this submission and they talked about this redirect module. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is interesting. Let me go look. The templates are exactly the same as what I had. My code was exactly the same. And I'm like, there is no way that someone wrote the same exact code and the same exact templating. That was an instant disqualification, of course. There was another instance where we thought that it was a very interesting submission, but one of the judges, out of curiosity, just looked up this person and their repositories. It ended up that most of the code in their submission was from a repo which was at least a year old. So again, there is nothing wrong with using other people's code, but that shouldn't be the majority of your entry, right? In those instances, and the judges have become really clever with finding things out. We've gotten to a point where even if we notice a fraction of that, we instantly disqualify that team because there's no point.
Well, in a hackathon day, there are a lot of interesting things happening. I remember every single hackathon night, and there's a lot rolling on Twitter as well.
The thing which like is very interesting, I think, to me is the things people do in common, regardless of where in the world they are, as well as the things which are different. Looking at people's feed of having breakfast together, like when they're halfway done through the hackathon, they're having pizza together. They set up this huge station in their office where they have Red Bulls and beer and pizza and snacks. People just sleeping wherever they get a space, right in the office, on beanbags, on the floor. I just love following everything on the social with the SCHackathon tag, and you get to watch all of these people do all these funny things.
I heard that a friend of us in common, Dan Solovay, had some hard times.
Yeah, it's almost like a curse for him. I remember there were a couple of hackathons, not just one, where I would get this message from Dan saying, "Oh my gosh, this is not believable, but here's the picture of me on the side of the road. I'm on my way home, but I have a flat tire." The first year, I'm like, yeah, "It's okay, Dan, I understand. Yeah, we'll take care of it." And then I think it happened one other time, and he's like, "You are not going to believe this. I'm going to send you a picture. I had a flat tire." So it's almost like Dan is cursed. Hopefully, he's not traveling anywhere this year in a car, and hopefully, he doesn't have a flat tire for submission.
What do you believe is the community legacy of Sitecore Hackathons?
I see people using the hackathon participation, the hackathon wins as part of their MVP applications. I think that for Sitecore as well as the community, it speaks to how difficult it is to do that. I think all of us have to accept the fact that it is not easy to spend up to 24 hours sitting together with two other people, writing code like a crazy person, eating junk just to keep yourself up is not an easy task. So anyone who does that deserves an award in itself. But I think the best part for me is to see that these couple of hundred people on this one night together working towards one goal, which is submitting modules, right? And I can personally tell you that I have used or looked at code of an existing submission because it was so interesting, or it solved a problem which I was going to solve. These repositories are out there for life for you to use them as you choose to. Some people expand on it and actually make them as modules and put them on the marketplace. So for me, showing that we're a community together on that one night with all of these people doing stuff together, having that common repository year after year for us to use it, that is the best part about it.
Totally agree. Every single participant in the hackathon, they are winners because it's the challenge. Sometimes the challenge is you are not feeling well, or sometimes the rules are different. Sometimes the challenge is one of your buddies are not able to join. Whatever it is, if you are a professional, that's where I think that you should not give up. So thank you, Akshay Sura, for this amazing contribution that you do for so many years in a row. You're amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this.
During the 24 hours of a hackathon, people are not just producing great software, but also amazing stories that will last forever in our community. I've asked people to provide their reactions. Here's some of the impressions collected. A new hackathon edition is here, so let's keep an eye on the social channels.